Manager Academy webinars presented by Lab Manager Magazine. My name is Jeff Tobe, and as we enter the fall here in the U.S., I hope kids are back in school and vacations are just great memories. I'm excited to say that with your feedback, these webinars are just getting better and better. I hope that those of you who are loyal participants would agree. I do want to apologize for some technical glitches we had last month. They've been addressed and should not be a problem as we move forward. Please let us know if there are any topics you'd like to see addressed in upcoming sessions. We want to make sure you are getting what you need out of these webinars. Just email me directly at jeff@jefftobe.com. That's Jeff, J-E-F-F, at jefftobe, T-O-B-E.com. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce our gracious and generous sponsor, Fran Ebert of Unity Lab Services. Fran?
Thanks, Jeff. We're really proud to have the opportunity to sponsor such a valuable educational webinar series for lab managers. And especially today, I'm looking forward to the topic of employee engagement because we realize that employees are the most valuable asset in any lab. To enable your talent to remain focused on their core priorities, we've developed our new service brand, Unity Lab Services, specifically to provide tools that maximize your lab workflow and free up precious time by decreasing the burden of service responsibilities that need to be managed by your talent. Of course, we recognize that lab managers are asked to balance a wide variety of activities to achieve the best results within a lab. So, our vision is a lab where your teams are enabled to work on their top priorities and non-core work is streamlined. Our solutions can enable your lab to really leverage our best practices and processes we have from over 100 years of experience in thousands of labs to eliminate time and trial and error. We can help you streamline supply management. To eliminate time in supply ordering process, our teams can set up and manage well-stocked, well-organized supply rooms located close to point of use. And additionally, we can streamline instrument and equipment service management. So with one call, you can request service on any instrument or equipment, regardless of manufacturer, and let our team handle the scheduling, following up, and the on-site hosting of service providers. So as you can see on your screen, we categorize these services into 4 enterprise service product lines that are offered at the lab, the site, or the enterprise level. Our services are all vendor agnostic, which means that we provide service solutions for all the equipment in a lab, again, regardless of the manufacturer, to provide service solutions without boundaries. Our experienced team of multi-vendor service engineers are expanding daily. And then you can see again on your screen that the services offered are consulting services, supply management services, asset management services, and scientific support services, primarily, again, the lab, the site, or the enterprise level. We, of course, have our traditional instrument-level service offerings, such as the support plans, training, the parts, and accessories. We'd be very happy to talk to you about our service solutions that can save you time and enable your talent to focus on their top priorities, all while controlling costs. To learn more, please visit unitylabservices.com, and please enjoy today's webinar.
Thank you, Fran. I hope you'll all consider Unity Lab Services for your lab. They're the reason we're able to bring you some of the top thought leaders in the world on a monthly basis. So thanks to our sponsor. Today's webinar is Get Off the Employee Engagement Roller Coaster. And once again, we've outdone ourselves with over 700 registrants. Before I introduce our presenter, please know that she welcomes your questions throughout her presentation. Many of you know the drill, but those just joining us for the first time, just type in your query in the chat box, and we'll try to get to it during our short time together. If we don't get to your question, our speaker will receive your question offline and will answer you privately. Also, I want to make sure that everyone has access to this webinar after the fact. So every webinar is posted up on the web about 1 week after airing, so you can get the entire presentation if you like. You need to write down this web address for today's webinar. It's www.labmanager.com/ownership. Again, www.labmanager.com/ownership. Or just go to the labmanager.com website, click on Webcasts and Podcasts to get all of the presentations. So let's get on with the reason you're here. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Vicki Hess. Vicki is all about engagement every step of the way. Her passion is using a shift in your viewpoint to create a great work environment for yourself, your coworkers, and your customers. Vicki is the author of Shift to Professional Paradise and The Nurse Manager's Guide to Hiring, Firing, and Inspiring. She is proud to be one of only 232 women in the world who have earned the Certified Speaking Professional designation, and Speaking.com named her a top 5 healthcare speaker for the 2nd year in a row. Vicki continues to learn every day from her 2 almost grown sons and husband what is really important in life. Please join me in welcoming Vicki Hess.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much. Hello to everyone on the line. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about how you can get off the employee engagement roller coaster. Do you remember the first time you were allowed to go to an amusement park all by yourself? Probably a teenager. I remember because I lived in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and it was when the Great American Scream Machine opened. Now, this was back in 1973. No, my memory's not that good, but you can Google anything, as you know. And my friends and I were thrilled that we were at the park without our parents around. We felt so independent. And probably 2 years ago, my husband and I were cleaning out the garage, and we found a box full of old trinkets, and I found 8 of these buttons that said, "I rode the Great American Scream Machine." So you can tell that day had a huge impression on me. Well, here's our tie-in to employee engagement. I think sometimes employee engagement feels like the really fun ride you have on a roller coaster where you're excited, there's a little suspense, your stomach is a little in knots, but in a good way. But I think all too often employee engagement feels like the yucky, nauseous feeling that we get when we're on the roller coaster, maybe one of those loop-de-loop kinds that they have at all the parks these days. So my goal for get off of that roller coaster and find your way back onto more stable ground. Now, I want to make sure that as you're listening, every one of you walks away with an easy-to-implement, high-impact idea or 2 or maybe 3. I'm going to share a lot of different ideas, and I realize that as lab managers, you all definitely have similar concerns, but you also have individual needs. So listen through your own lens of the things that are particularly troublesome to you right now, and that way they'll pop up, and you should have a better chance of getting the specific solution that you need. Now, Jeff mentioned that we are going to be taking questions, but I'm guessing that with all the people on the line, there's going to be more questions than we're going to have time. So if you would like, I am happy to take those questions by phone call. My philosophy in working with my clients is engagement every step of the way, both from how I engage with them and how they engage with their employees. So in commitment to that promise, here's my phone number. This is my office number in Baltimore, Maryland, some Eastern Daylight Time, and I'm happy to give you some time on the phone to answer your questions if we don't get to them today and you think of something after the call is over. So let's start with a shared definition of engagement. I like this one that Hewitt and Associates shared in 2009. And you can see there's 3 key areas that I'm going to focus on. It's the emotional commitment, so that means employees' hearts are in their job, and the intellectual commitment, which means their head is in their job. And then you see the other 2 parts that are highlighted, sustaining and so strong business performance, building and sustaining, excuse me. And I think that's where it's really important, because if we just had an emotional and intellectual commitment without the tie-in to the performance, well, that might be a hobby or something we enjoy doing in our leisure time. But really, when you're running a lab, it really is all about the deliverables that you're providing for your end users and your organizations. So I call this state of engagement when people are emotionally and intellectually committed and sustaining and building business performance, professional paradise. You heard Jeff mention that I wrote a book called Shift to Professional Paradise. And when I wrote that book, what I found was that the words that people kept using over and over again for engagement in their vernacular was satisfied, energized, and productive. So let's make a big assumption right here so that we're on the same page. We are not going to spend time today talking about how engagement positively impacts results. We're going to assume that that's true. And I want to share with you one statistic that I love from Harvard Business Review this past January. In a sweeping meta-analysis of 225 academic studies. Now, I'm sure you remember this from school. Meta-analysis means they didn't do their own original research. They looked at all those studies. These 3 scholars found that happy employees have, on average, 31% higher productivity. It talks about sales being higher. I realize your folks aren't necessarily doing sales. Their creativity is 3 times higher. So basically, this is like getting another third of your workforce without hiring anybody new. So to me, that says it all. That says this is definitely worth our time. And when I was writing the book, I wanted to ask people, well, what did make you happy at work? And so, you know, if happiness and being satisfied and energized is going to help us be more productive, what gets you there? Now, look at these responses. I don't think any of these are very surprising, and I bet if I would have asked you all, you would have said some similar things. The great news about these is that until you get down to the money, none of those cost money. Yes, they take time and they take effort, but they don't cost money. Giving someone the opportunity to complete a project or a task, that's probably what you're thinking you do all the time. But it's giving them the opportunity to do that in a framework that helps them grow and develop. Those positive connections and teamwork are all about the relationships that we create at work. And no matter what, we all maybe think people are adults. Why do they need to receive appreciation? You think maybe that's kid stuff. It's not true. People want to receive appreciation. So you get the idea. Of course, money is important, but the other elements are what makes folks happy day in and day out at work. So while we're talking today, I want you to think about 2 things. A strategic focus. So what would you need to do strategically at your organization or department level in general? Just kind of keep that as your overarching idea. And what we're going to focus on predominantly is the tactical actions. Now, when I wrote my other book, The Nurse Manager's Guide to Hiring, Firing, and Inspiring, I created this partnership protocol that really shows the link between inspiring managers and engaged employees. And I realize that you all aren't nurse managers, and it doesn't matter because the concepts apply no matter what kind of leadership role someone is in. So what I'm going to do on the webinar today is we're going to look at each of these 5 areas. And for each of the 5 areas, I'm going to share with you a list of things that you could do more of and less of, hence our up and down arrows. What could you do more of and less of? And you have those in your handouts as well, because I'm going to pick one of those, and I'm going to share a story or an anecdote with you, something that I've experienced myself or one of my clients has experienced or that I've heard or read about. And then the last thing we're going to do for each area is last year and the year before, I put out a request for all of my email newsletter subscribers and lots of folks that had heard me speak in the past, and I asked this question. What are 1 or 2 things that your manager has done in the last month that help you to be more satisfied, energized, and productive? I've just sent out the question for this year. I haven't processed all the information, but my initial responses are that things look pretty similar. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of the responses from that survey. These are in the responders' own words. So let's get started so you can see an idea of how this is going to flow. The first area that we're going to look at is aligning vision and values. Now, you can see in your handouts, you have this slide, and you can see on your screen now that there's a lot of different things you can either do more of or less of to help align vision and values. One of the reasons that this element is so important is that when people understand how their job connects to the overall strategy, mission, vision of an organization, they're much more likely to be engaged. I'll give you a quick example. I'm working with an organization right now. They built a huge addition to their facility. Everyone in the organization has been involved in this addition and getting it up and running. And now it's all done. And everyone sort of feels like they're blowing in the wind because they had this big strategic goal and they've met it. And now they're thinking, what's next? Let me share with you another story of how this might come into play. Now, West Virginia University Hospital is one of my clients, And one of the ways that they have incorporated this idea of aligning vision and values is they have daily huddles. And it doesn't matter whether you work in healthcare or not. I realize lots of you are not in the healthcare environment. But what happens in this daily huddle, as you can see from the pictures, everybody's standing up. It just takes a minute or two. They're talking about anything new or different that people need to know about. But a key element is the question, how does your job influence the vision of the hospital? And staff members share extemporaneously how their job influences the vision of the hospital. This would be a great man-on-the-street question for you to ask your lab staff. If I came in, or one of the late-night TV guys that talk about this when they do it actually on the real streets of the city, if I asked your team members, how does your job here in the lab influence the vision of the hospital? Not the hospital, of your organization. Could they answer that? If they can't, I would say this is something you definitely want to incorporate. Maybe you don't do a daily huddle, maybe you do a weekly huddle. Maybe you incorporate it into staff meetings. But what you want to make sure is of that whole list of what you can do more of and less of, you've got to figure out a way to make daily connections to the work that people do and the mission and vision and values of your organization. You can't just put it on the wall and hope people look at it. You know how that goes? People stop seeing those signs after they're up for probably a week or two. The other element that I want to hit on briefly is hiring for fit. I can't tell you how many people I've heard lately saying, we hire for attitude, we train for skills. This is very exciting. Now, I realize your staff have a high degree of a technical skill that they need. So what you want to look at that is then, of all the people I have with those technical skills, because you're probably not going to be able to train them on everything they need to do, but of all the people that are equally qualified technically, I'm going to hire the person for their attitude and their fit. And one question that I ask on every interview to find out the fit is, what's happened in the last week at your current job that's gotten you satisfied, energized, and productive? And then you just sit and listen. And the person may look at you like a deer in headlights because they don't usually get asked that kind of question, but it'll be very illuminating and it'll give you a lot of good ideas on what's important to them. I'll repeat the question again. What's something that's happened in the last week at your current job that's gotten you satisfied, energized, and productive? And then when you hear that response, you listen and you decide, is that a good fit for the position that you're hiring for? Now, a couple of comments from that survey that I told you about. The executive team is actively communicating the decisions they're making and the impact they foresee to keep our organization vibrant during upcoming cuts that will happen in our industry. When people don't know what's going on, you know what happens? They make stuff up, and that's not good. So maybe your executive team isn't coming to the lab, but you get the information from the executive team, and you can pass it along to the lab. Just like number 2 says, she shared regular updates about the overall direction for our group and how we fit into the larger organizational structure. Now, I would call these 2 suggestions or ideas low-hanging fruit. Remember I said I want you to think about easy to implement, high impact. So they're easy to implement. Communication is something that we do all the time. It's a matter of focusing our communication. And they're obviously high impact. Someone took the time. When they answered that survey question that I asked them, what are 2 or 3 things your manager's done to get you satisfied, energized, and productive? I did not give them any prompts. I didn't ask them to check boxes. These are things that people wrote down that were meaningful to them. And I can tell you that anything that I included here as an example, there were multiple examples or it wouldn't have made the list. So that's our first element of aligning vision and values. We want to look at the second one, which is fostering open communication. Now, what you're going to see, and you might already see it just with the titles, is that there's a lot of overlap. That's good because things don't have to fall into one particular category so much as you need to make sure you're covering all the bases. So here's a list of things you can do more of or less of to foster open communication. The thing that I hear leaders complain about most is that they're always in meetings. If you can look at your calendar and you could say to yourself, what's the meeting that I could not participate in? People invite you to meetings all the time. That doesn't mean you have to go. Maybe there's someone on your team you can delegate to. That goes under encourage growth and development, a different category. Maybe it's a meeting that you needed to go to once and you've had on your calendar ever since, and you figured out you don't need to go anymore. You get the idea. If you're going to be adding these easy-to-implement, high-impact ideas, you need to get rid of something else. We can't keep squeezing the work into the bag and thinking the bag's not going to burst. So of this list on the left of things to do more of or less of, what I want to suggest, a key element that you're going to get the best bang for your buck is one-on-one meetings. Now, I want to be really clear what I mean by a one-on-one meeting. In my vernacular, a one-on-one meeting is held monthly. It's an appointment on the calendar, and it lasts at least 30 minutes. It is not performance related. It's not on the fly. It's done in a private area. If you have your own office, it's done there. If you're in a cubicle setting, you're maybe going in a conference room or maybe even outside if you've got benches somewhere that you can sit at. And you're asking 3 questions. What's working? And you listen. What's working with work right now? What's working with you and your job? And you listen. And you're asking what needs work? And you're listening to that. So what's working? What needs work? And then what's next? So what's working? Fantastic. What could you do more of, better, or differently so that other people might be able to benefit from what's working? What needs work? Okay, this doesn't mean you're going to have the solution. This is where you get into a dialogue. Someone's saying they're working too many hours. Someone's saying they're bored. Someone's saying a team member is not contributing. Whatever's going on, that's where you get into that dialogue. And then what's next is where you're confirming, okay, here's what I'll do, here's what you'll do. And do you know what matters most about these one-on-one meetings? Not even the content of the meeting, but that you're spending time with the employee one-on-one. Now, if you've got way too many employees to meet with monthly that directly report to you, you might come up with some a secondary level of informal leadership that meets with folks, or spread it out over every other month. That's perfectly fine as well. So one-on-one meetings are huge in terms of getting a huge bang for your buck. A couple of things that we heard from the survey. Listens to our suggestions and follows up, gives us immediate feedback and keeps us informed of what's going on as it could impact us. And the second one shocked me. Responded promptly to an email or phone message I left. I thought to myself, kind of in a sad way, boy, the bar has not been set very high. If, get this in your head now, someone was doing their work, I sent them a link to a survey, they stopped what they were doing, they started to fill out the survey, and the thing that got them satisfied and energized was that their boss responded promptly to an email or a phone message. Gosh, that must mean that in the past they've had bosses who aren't. And this was a big deal. Listening to suggestions and following up, giving people feedback. Yes, you heard this right. An employee said they wanted feedback from their boss. So this is permission for you to promptly respond, and they listen to suggestions and give follow-up. Now I want to stop for a minute, Jeff, and see what questions have come in before we get into our third area. Are there some questions that would make sense to answer now?
Yeah, perfect. Here's one. Should the manager or the employees be responsible for setting up the one-on-one meetings?
The managers should be responsible for setting up the one-on-one meetings initially, and once you get them set up, it's usually best to keep them on a regular basis. You know, the third Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. is Jeff, and the second Thursday is Kaylee, and you get the idea. If that doesn't work with your schedule, it can get kind of complicated, and so you want to make sure then at the end of this one-on-one, together you're making sure you have the next one-on-one scheduled. But it's definitely the manager's responsibility to make sure that it's on the calendar. It's both of your responsibility to be there, obviously, and I would strongly caution you not to cancel that meeting unless it's absolutely an emergency, because if that happens more than once or twice, the employee starts to feel like they're not important, and that's way worse than never having the one-on-one to begin with.
Well, let's look at it globally. Whose job is it to engage employees? The leaders, the managers, or the staff themselves?
Good question. So it's interesting because what I write about in my book, Shift to Professional Paradise, is that you are the only one that can create your own professional paradise. And obviously, Professional Paradise is not a specific employer. In the way I describe it, it's a mindset followed by actions that lead to positive outcomes. So you have to be the Chief Paradise Officer of your own job, whether you're an executive leader, a mid-level leader, a frontline leader, or a staff member. Having said that, what a lab manager can do is create an environment where others can find that sense of engagement. And one of the things that I think we can do as leaders is removing obstacles. And so if you're having one-on-one meetings and you're listening, you know what some of those obstacles are. You hear the trends from person to person. If a particular piece of equipment is what's not working from everybody that month, and you knew it, but you kind of haven't dealt with it, well, remove that obstacle, and then you can help the person re-engage. It's an internal job with external ramifications.
Now, Vicki, when you say leader, that's not somebody necessarily with that title, right? They don't have
That's
to
correct.
have a title.
Good point, Jeff. This could be an informal leader or a formal leader. I know when I worked as a floor nurse in the hospital, I was not in a leadership role formally, but I certainly had a lot of opportunities to impact the way we did work by communicating and participating on teams and committees. And so, yeah, no matter where you are in the lab, title-wise, everyone can have an impact on engagement.
Perfect. And one more. You know, knowing this group as well as I do now after a few years, there is so much change going on in their world at any given time. How can you expect employees to stay engaged during that turmoil?
Yes. And I think the two complaints I hear most in my travels around the country are there's way too much change and we're being asked to do more with less. And I'm guessing people that are listening are probably nodding their head because I can't imagine in your labs things are much different. And so what ends up happening with that is people are dealing with lots of change, and these 5 elements that I'm talking with you about are going to help. If you're aligning the change with the vision and values, that's going to make the engagement higher. If you are fostering open communication around change, if you're creating and building relationships, then people trust you and they trust that the change makes sense. Supporting team members through change and encouraging growth and development. Change is a great way to encourage growth and development. So you can really use all 5 of these different elements, and one-on-one meetings are going to be helpful. The daily huddles are going to be helpful. In terms of how to manage that change. The worst thing with change is you're involved in all the pre-planning as the lab manager, or maybe informally you're on a team, and then all of a sudden you introduce the change to the staff, and you expect everyone to jump on board. When you've had 3 or 4 months of planning to get used to it, you've got to give people time, and you've got to give them a voice for communicating how they feel about the change, and I think sometimes we don't always do that.
Perfect. Well, I think our entire audience is on a personal paradise, in their own personal paradise right now, because they're still on vacation in their minds. I'm not getting all these questions I normally get. So let's continue, and let's ask everybody, please ask Vicki questions, and we'll try and get to them. Thanks, Vicki.
Okay, sure. So the next area that we're talking about is creating and building relationships. And fostering open communications is part of that. Supporting team members is part of that, but looking at it as part of the model, here are some of the things that you do day in and day out that help you create and build relationships. I think one of the things I hear complaints about from staff members is when their managers are either in their office or in the meetings. I mentioned that, when they're just not around. So the key element that I think makes the biggest difference in terms of creating and building relationships, if you had to do one thing that's on the left-hand side of that column, and actually that one thing really is going to help you do the other 4, that would be regular rounding. And when you think about rounding, what you're doing is you're getting out in the lab, and I know some of you are saying, oh, I walk through the lab all the time. But I call it, the way that I recommend doing rounding is called a TLC check-in. It's a traffic light check. And you can ask people how their day is going. Is it a red light day, a green light day, a yellow light day? And just like you know a traffic light, how that works. A red light day has probably got a lot of stops and obstacles and things that are going wrong. A yellow light might mean, you know, things are a little slow. I'm slowing down as I go through the intersection. A green light day means everything's going on all cylinders. So as you're rounding, you can talk with your staff and say, I'm here to do a traffic light check-in. You know, what's going on? How's the traffic? And I don't mean the job workflow traffic as much as the engagement traffic. What's your engagement level? Is it red or green or yellow? And that can help you have a much better idea. The other thing that rounding and being out and about is going to help you with is you're going to be involved in more of those casual conversations, the ones where people are laughing or sharing stories. You hear more of what's happening kind of behind the scenes that you wouldn't hear about if you were in your office or in meetings. The other thing you're going to get is on-the-spot feedback. If you're out rounding, people are going to tell you if something's wrong. And so I would recommend that you have rounding at least once a week. One organization I work with has something they call Journey Fridays, and they only, organization-wide, and you could do this within the lab, your department, or you could recommend that your organization do it. But they say that the only meetings that will be on Fridays are of strategic importance. There are no tactical, regular, routine meetings that are set up on Fridays. And Friday is the day that all leaders in that organization are out rounding. And they might be rounding in their own departments, and they're also rounding in departments that are their clients, their internal clients. They might be rounding on the phone with customers. So look at who you support in your lab, and you might be rounding with those folks, whether they're internal or external. And so you spend your time on Friday. You might be rounding with other leaders that you count on, the people that support you. That can be helpful as well. Another great way to create and build relationships is meals. I remember when I worked in human resources back a while ago, and my boss would sit with us at lunch. And we had a little round table in a conference room, and most of us brought our lunch because the cafeteria was kind of far. And she had a no work talk at lunch rule. And there were probably 5 or 6 of us, all women at the time, that would sit and have lunch together. And we would invariably end up talking about recipes or kids or current events, what was going on in the world, et cetera. And this gave her a chance to get to know us, and vice versa, us a chance to get to know her. And those, even if you don't do it every day, if you're spending that informal time day in and day out. Now, some of you are probably saying, oh my gosh, Vicki, really? Really? You're telling us we should have lunch? I don't have time to have lunch. I'm running from one place to another. I'm suggesting that you need to make time. And if you think it's so basic, well, then you're probably doing a good job, and you need to keep it up because people would miss you if you weren't there. Now, a couple of comments that we heard from the survey. My manager is huge into giving personal thank you notes. I think I've received 2 in the past couple of months, but the fact that he takes the time to handwrite the note gives me motivation to continue performing at the highest level. I love personal thank you notes. Even better if you send them home. It should be pretty easy for you to access the team's home address. And the reason that sending them home makes such a difference is that the folks that support your employee, the employee that reports to you, are happy to see that you appreciate them, whether they live with parents or spouses or roommates. When you get a letter at home from your boss that says thank you, and it's specific, and it says, you know, thank you so much for the outstanding job you did coming in over the weekend to handle that crisis with the equipment. It made a huge difference in our ability to meet our clients' needs, etc. Don't even have to include the Starbucks gift card. If you want to, that's great, but people appreciate being appreciated. I don't know about you, but I never met anyone who sat around the dinner table with their family and said, I wish my boss would stop appreciating me. You know, it's just too much already. It just doesn't happen. So the other comment that you see on here ties into what we've talked about, and I included it on this one, the creating and building relationships, instead of the the fostering open communications because I think it shows up over and over again. Makes time to meet one-on-one for 15 minutes each month. So this person only did it for 15 minutes, but obviously their direct report thought that was very important. So creating and building relationships is a key. Then we get into supporting team members. And when we're thinking about supporting team members, a big part of that is accountability and flexibility. So much is being written now about flexibility in the workplace. Now, you know what you need to cover in terms of job responsibilities. But if there are ways that people can do their work virtually or come in earlier or stay later and come in later, etc., having that flexibility creates a high level of engagement. If you have straight shifts and people are in those shifts, you might look at why that is. Is that way because it's always been that way or because it's the right thing to do? You'll see under supporting team members, removing obstacles comes up again. And I love that because I think sometimes we feel helpless as leaders because there is a lot going on with change. We are having to ask people to do more with less. So what could we help to remove? Maybe there's some report that you've been producing for a long time that people just don't need anymore, or it could be automated and done more effectively. Maybe if the communication improved between your department and another department, aka getting rid of silos, then the work would be easier to do. What's that snagging problem that keeps coming up that hasn't been fixed? It's literally like the squeaky wheel, only it has not gotten any grease. So I mentioned the idea of the thank you note under creating and building relationships, but I think recognizing good work is another great way to support your team members. This is a real Facebook post from a friend of my family's. Lauren Jackson is a 25-year-old occupational therapist who lives in Richmond, Virginia, and she gave me permission to use this today. And she posted this, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I saw it, and I thought, oh my gosh, here she is. Love receiving positive feedback about my job performance. Made me smile the rest of the day. And look at that, 11 other people liked it. Now, if you haven't been on Facebook lately, you click on like when you think something's cool and you agree with it. So to me, that shows the real power of getting that positive feedback. She didn't say, love receiving a big raise. She didn't say, love getting a prize or having a pizza party. She said, love receiving feedback. Now, Lauren is a Gen Y millennial worker. And sometimes people get into those generational stereotypes, and they're not sure who wants feedback and who doesn't. I don't think you can make stereotypes like that. I think you're a lot better off getting to know your employees. And I hope Lauren's boss knows how much she appreciated that positive feedback so that the boss can keep giving her that positive feedback, because obviously it made her happy and productive for the rest of her day. A couple of comments that we heard: worked diligently on staffing issues, terminated employees who weren't doing their job, counseled others that needed assistance, and hired some dynamic new staff. Our whole department's been revitalized. You know that one person, I would call them the chain gang member, because the opposite of professional paradise is professional prison. And when someone has given themselves a self-imposed term in professional prison, I call them a member of the chain gang. And they're your low performer, the one who is actively disengaged. When you help that person find a job outside your organization that's going to meet their needs better, your team is going to be so happy. And that is evidenced by this comment. She terminated employees who are not doing their job, counseled others that need assistance, and hired dynamic new staff. That's a great way to support your team. Here's one: supported a recognition event for nurses who had achieved levels 3 and 4 on our clinical ladder. Those of you in healthcare might know what a clinical ladder is. It's just an internal development tool. But you get the idea, supporting a recognition event, whatever that is. Are there lab clinical ladders that you're a part of? Are there different milestones and stair steps? Are there informal points at which you want to recognize people and have a celebration. Another cool thing you can do is celebrate before the event has even happened. Let's say you're trying to increase your productivity by 20%. Have a celebration party in advance of what it's going to feel like when we get to that 20% improvement. Let everybody savor that idea. Sounds kind of funny, but it helps people put the idea in their mind that they can do it. Now, our last of our 5 areas is encouraging growth and development. Here's a list of ideas of things you can do more of and less of. I think a lot of times when we think about growth and development, we think about education. We think about sending people to conferences. And I know a lot of people's budgets have been slimmed down, and you're looking for creative ways to encourage growth and development. One that I heard about recently when I was listening to NPR is something called Coursera.org. You can see the note on your website, on your handout. And what Coursera is it is college professors from around the world that offer free courses. For example, there's a statistics course that's starting soon that's being offered by a Princeton University professor. It's 100% free. So let's say you've got somebody in your department who's really interested in statistics and wants to hone their skills. You might say, why don't you use time while you're at work to participate in the classes, because they're all asynchronous. You can do them whenever you want. And then I want you to do a workshop for us about statistics in the lab. Other ideas are peer mentoring and cross-functional training, those stretch assignments. I want to share another personal story with you. When I was working in the hospital, my boss was telling me, kind of complaining a little bit, that she had to be on this lost wheelchair committee. You can imagine how many lost wheelchairs there are at any given hospital at any given time. And my ears kind of perked up because I had been wanting to be on a hospital-wide committee. I wanted to get to know more people in the organization. I wanted to cross some of the boundaries of our department. This was when I was working in human resources and nursing staff development. And so what I thought was pretty cool was we were talking in a one-on-one, and I was talking about how I wanted to get involved, and she was saying, oh, I need to do this, be on this lost wheelchair committee. Would you like to do that? So I was thrilled. Now, I'm sure if I could see some of your eyes, you'd be rolling them thinking you were thrilled to be on a lost wheelchair, cross-functional, performance improvement team. Absolutely. Because for me, that got me satisfied and energized and productive. It let me meet the people I wanted to meet, see a bigger picture view, and it helped me to grow and develop. I learned a set of performance improvement processes that I could then apply in any number of other situations. So look for growth and development opportunities in every nook and cranny because they're there. Here's a couple of examples of what people said. I've been given more responsibilities to make independent decisions. I feel this will develop my leadership potential. You know what people complain about most on this survey, because there is, even though they're supposed to tell me what their manager did to get them satisfied and energized, of course people write what's done that annoys them. It's micromanaging. Time after time after time, survey after survey. So this is the opposite of micromanaging. Given more responsibilities to make independent decisions. And the second one ties right into that. He or she, I don't know what it was, allowed me to be creative and develop my own special project. He was supportive and gave me what I needed and the authority to do the project. Neither one of those cost money. All they do is require thoughtful dialogue, listening. So when you're in your one-on-one meeting and you're talking about what's working and what's not, what's next, that's your perfect time to figure out growth and development opportunities. That's the perfect time to look at how you can better support this team member. It's the perfect time to create and build a relationship, and it is fostering open communications. So you can see how an element that's a high impact, easy to implement idea in one area impacts quite a few others. So your homework, when we get off the call, and hopefully you'll do it not too long after the call while all of this is fresh in your mind, is to look at what is one thing that you need to do more of when it comes to engagement. You could look at one thing in each area. That would probably help you the most, but that might be too many things. So maybe the 2 or 3 things that you think really resonated and would make a difference. What is one thing that you want to do less of? What can you take off your plate that would help with engaging employees? So let's stop again and see about some questions before I do my final wrap-up slides. Jeff, do we have any questions?
Of course we do, because I
Okay.
them. That's why. This is a bit of a comment, and I'd just like you to comment on it. Having a hard stop time is important. Overworking all the time is a killer. Emergencies, yes. Regularly, no. Play is important. Can you comment on play in the workplace?
Yes. And it's funny because I love the idea of play in the workplace. I don't know if you guys have seen the Volkswagen commercials about how fun improves our lives. And there's a really cool video on YouTube. Go to funtheory.com, and Volkswagen supports it, and I don't have any affiliation with Volkswagen. I've just seen these videos. And for example, they made the stairs at a subway station into piano, looking like a piano keys, and the stairs were right next to an escalator. And I think the statistics showed that when they made the stairs look like the piano and they actually made noise when you walked on them, something like 67% more people took the stairs because it was fun. And there was another experiment they did about slowing down in school zones. And they had an audio reward. It played like a cool sound when you slowed down. They had something with recycling in a park, where if you threw the recycling into the bin, it made a funny noise. And everyone was scouring the park for recyclables and bringing their recyclables so they could hear the funny noise. So I think play is very important. Having fun is very important. And as a leader, doesn't have to be like you're coming in a clown costume kind of fun. It's letting people relax and enjoy. If we were all together in a room and I asked you to raise your hands if you laugh and enjoy yourself at work, I would say probably 90% of you would raise your hands. That's typical in most audiences that I speak to. And so we do it informally. As a leader, you just want to make sure to encourage it. And I love the idea of having end times that are agreed upon. I think every single one of us could work nonstop and probably still never get all our work done. So the idea of a leader role modeling, leaving the lab and knowing that, yes, you need the staff coverage, but it's okay for people to leave when they're supposed to be leaving. And it's not expected that they're answering emails over the weekends and evenings, and really setting the tone for that. In fact, I just heard somebody say they had to actually dismantle someone's email while he went on vacation because he wasn't going to, he kept, in the past, he'd always been involved, and they really felt like he needed a good vacation. So hopefully it won't come to that. Another question?
I wish my wife would do that to my email, but anyway.
Right, that would be pretty good.
As an employee, I'm a manager who tries to get to know me, but I know it's not sincere. Any suggestions on how to handle that?
Yeah, Gandhi says, be the change you want to see in the world. So if you want to have a stronger relationship, then what I would do is work to create a stronger relationship with my boss. If I want him or her to get to know me, I would try to get to know them. I'll quote St. Francis of Assisi too, seek first to understand, then be understood. And even though you might think, well, it's the leader, they're supposed to know better, in this case, the person doesn't. So I would reach out and try and get to know that person and work on building a positive relationship. If you know what keeps your boss up at night and you understand what their key concerns are, then you can help them to accomplish those goals, which in turn is going to help the organization and your customers, again, either internal or external. And it's also going to help you connect to what gets you satisfied and energized. So I definitely think you can't wait for somebody else to take the first step. Let's say your boss doesn't do one-on-one meetings and you'd like to have one. Go in and make a suggestion, but tie it to the vision, the mission, the values. Tie it to overall productivity. Make it beneficial from a business perspective, and the other parts will all fall into place.
Great. Here's another one. My model has changed from a union environment to an at-will, non-union. Staff are invested in the old system, and right now I'm trying to tout the advantages of the new paradigm. Any suggestions?
Yeah. what you need to do with big changes like that, in my book, Shift to Professional Paradise, I outline this 5-step shift process. Now, we don't have enough time to get into all of that right now, but what the shift process, the first step is stop and take a deep breath. When you have such a big change, it's worthwhile to get the whole team together and collectively, and I do mean literally, everybody stop and take a deep breath. And that may sound really funny, but what that does is that triggers everyone's mind to think differently. And then you can get into harnessing harmful knee-jerk reactions and identifying and managing negative emotions. That's the H and the I of shift. Because I think what happens a lot of times when we are, as leaders, implement changes, in that case, you probably think, oh, this is going to be great. Certainly from a leadership perspective, it's probably good. Hopefully it's good for the employees as well. But you've got to let people process it. And you have to look at what are their beliefs and mindsets about the new environment. What are their worries? What are they concerned about? Get a flip chart out. Get everyone together. Sometimes we're afraid to talk about things that are perceived as being negative when really it's just how people are feeling. And if you don't talk about it, then they're not going to get past it. Kind of like when you're a little kid and your parents said, you know, eat your peas or you can't have dessert, and you sat at the table till the peas got really cold and you dug your heels in. And that's what employees do sometimes. They won't just eat their peas, and we expect them to. Well, as adults, we can't be like that. You can't tell employees to eat their peas and sit at the table. It doesn't work. You want to engage with them about new pea recipes. I know I've gone off on a weird metaphor there, but you get the idea.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, right. It is. Well, you should have had lunch already, Jeff, but go ahead.
Here's one. It's an interesting question, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up to it. How to deal with an employee who is more interested in authority than responsibility? And then maybe you can also comment, Vicki, on accountability. I mean, when it comes to engagement, there has to be an element of accountability, too.
Yes. Okay, so the first question was they want authority but not responsibility.
Correct.
So they want a title or something, but they don't want to have to do the work that goes along with that, is what that sounds like. So to me, if you look at getting to know what gets someone satisfied and energized, something about that authority is providing a benefit for that person. And what would be important then is to have that conversation about what is it that you like about being a leader. Tell me a little bit more about how this is helping you to be more of a Chief Paradise Officer at work. What parts of leadership help get you satisfied and energized? And by engaging in that dialogue, you're going to hear in their own words, maybe the reason they don't want the responsibility is they're not comfortable doing what you're asking them to do, and so they're afraid. As adults in the workplace, one of our biggest fears, beyond typical safety fears, biggest intellectual fear, is looking dumb, you know, kind of not knowing how to do something. So if someone's in a leadership role and they like authority but not responsibility, it may be because they're not sure how to, for example, hold someone accountable, or they're not sure how to do a performance appraisal, or how to compliment someone. We think that's so easy, but for some people it's not as easy. So I think if you have someone who wants authority but not responsibility, you need to have the conversation with them and say, hey, you know, let's talk about what's getting you satisfied and energized here in this leadership role, and then take it into the responsibilities. Well, what about this or that, the things that you want them to be more responsible for? And when you mention accountability, I think accountability is a huge responsibility of an engaging and inspiring leader. As I mentioned, people appreciate when leaders hold them and their peers accountable. One of the worst things you can do is let everybody kind of slide. That's good to do if there's an extenuating circumstance or something that's, you know, getting in the way that's bigger than the issue itself. But accountability gets back to beliefs and mindsets. A lot of us believe that accountability, holding people accountable, is going to damage relationships. And the opposite is true if you hold people accountable in a factual, data-driven method. At my website, hiringfiringinspiring.com, there are 24 free time-saver tools, and one of those is a data-driven discussion model. And it is 4 steps for accountability: describe the situation, ask questions and listen, talk through solutions, and agree on next steps. And oh, by the way, it works with kids as well as it works with employees. Not that employees are like children, but the process works well equally, or with parents or whomever you need to have a discussion with. But this idea of accountability, managers that are very inspiring and create a highly engaged workplace absolutely hold their team accountable, and their team appreciates that. It's like great coaches in sports. Those great coaches don't let people slide. They help people to reach a higher level of excellence, and that's what accountability does. It helps your team reach a higher level of excellence. And if you remember from what makes people happy at the beginning, completing a project or a task, we thrive on doing work and getting work done well.
Great. Here's one. If you're overworked, your boss makes unreasonable demands, it keeps you constantly busy, how do you engage the employees that you oversee without passing on your frustration?
Yeah, so that's kind of a twofold thing. Hopefully you're having one-on-one meetings with your boss so you can share those concerns. And if you're not, I would set up those meetings not to go complain, but to really look at this from an effectiveness perspective. If I were meeting with my boss because I had so much to do that I was having a tough time engaging my own employees, I would want to focus on the business outcomes and the key measures that my boss was interested in, and point out how changing things were going to help us achieve those key metrics in a better way. And I think one of the things that I talk about in shifting to professional paradise is identifying and managing your own negative emotions. Because as a leader, if you're not a chief paradise officer yourself, you can't expect to be working with a group. Now, I'm not saying every now and again you don't have a bad day. We all do. But I'm saying in general, more often than not. So if you are satisfied, energized, and productive in your job, you have to be good at identifying and managing your own negative emotions. And that happens at 2 levels. One is the level of when you get hit with a challenge, or I call it a POW, a P-O-W, like a punch, a POW. You get hit with a POW, you have to be able to handle it in the heat of the moment. Maybe you count to 10, maybe you take a quick break, maybe you talk to a trusted advisor, but you got to handle it in the heat of the moment. But more importantly, as leaders, we've got to have systemic emotional management tools, whether that's exercise or hobbies or good friends or spirituality. You've got to be engaging in things outside of work that are filling your bucket, as that book talks about, how full is your bucket. You've got to fill your own bucket before you can fill somebody else's. So if you're feeling really stressed and put upon and having a hard time getting employees to engage, then you got to clean up your own house first.
Great. Well, we have some house cleaning to do too. So, I know you want to talk about some free resources
yes.
that you're going to offer.
Yeah,
and some people have asked if they can still get the handouts. So,
and Carly has the handouts. Okay. I guess that was sent out to participants, so I'm assuming they could get that.
And let me just mention that the entire webinar is archived in about 1 week at labmanager.com/ownership. So you can download all the slides then too.
So if you'd like to get, if you'd like to get that report, that's what managers in Professional Paradise are doing right, that I've been quoting from, you can go to my website and put in the / the Lab Managers Free Report, and you'll see that. I also have a monthly e-newsletter called Simple Steps. STEPS stands for Shortcuts to Energy, Productivity, and Satisfaction. And those other 2 websites you see there both have free tools that you can download and access for individuals and leaders there. So the idea here is to save the roller coaster rides for the amusement park with your kids or your nieces and your nephews. And if you want to get off the employee engagement roller coaster, you can use these 5 strategies, and you'll end up in the tunnel of love. It's been delightful to talk to you all, and I look forward to hearing from you by phone if you didn't get your question answered, or email as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Vicki. And I do want to mention that Kaylee, who's working behind the scenes every month, and we never give her enough credit, has texted me that the handouts will be available on the site that I gave you, labmanager.com/ownership. They'll be there as well. There it is. Write that address down in about a week. Everything will be up online. Vicki, thanks so much for your insights. As you can see, if you're interested in contacting Vicki, you know how to get her. Vicki at vickihess.com is one of the easier ways. And remember, Vicki does speak and train and consult, and like all of our presenters, is available to take your organization to the next plateau. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Unity Lab Services, without whom this webinar series just wouldn't be possible. Next month, mark your calendars for the first Wednesday of the month for Bully Free in Your Lab with professional speaker and author Valerie Cade. I think this is going to be a really interesting one. So please mark your calendars for Wednesday, October 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Watch your email for more details. And again, it's my honor and my privilege to be your host. And until next month, this is Jeff Tobe urging you to keep coloring outside the lines.